Hi guys, we're here. I have decided to create a series of videos where I talk about tanking in ChromieCraft and create guides for each tank spec and the upcoming content which is Molten Core. As you all know, Molten Core will be released in ChromieCraft on the 5th of January, and having rated it in PTR, I have some information I would like to share with you guys about how you can best prepare your characters to deal with it. This is going to be the first video in the series, which is my Prot Warrior guide for ChromieCraft. I know that there are many guides available that talk about all the basics of the class and the 3.3.5 patch and how to play it in general. So I will try to focus more on the information that you cannot acquire with a simple Google search that are kind of unique to ChromieCraft because of certain abilities not being available or certain items influencing the builds and things like that. So let's get started. The first is talents. Now I will give you a quick information about all of the talents and why I picked them. But most of it is very straightforward, so it will be brief. So in protection 3, we will start with shield specialization, which is obvious. You get 5% block and you get rage, which is your primary rage generator when you are tanking ads, which is what warriors will be doing most of the time. Because they are very strong against physical damage, but quite weak against magical damage. Also, it is maybe important to know the strengths and weaknesses of each of the classes. So we are concerned with only the tanks. So we have three options. We have the bear, we have the protadin, and we have the warrior. While the protadin has higher armor and second life and a shorter wall, which is divine protection, and better magic damage reduction, which makes it a good single target or boss tank. The warrior have very strong big cooldowns, more mobility, better survivability against physical damage, but most importantly, above the other tanks, warriors have insane threat generation. Like it isn't even close at the moment. Mostly AoE threat because of Cleave, Revenge, Thunderclap, and Shockwave. These are the main, and of course shouts. Like warriors have so much AoE threat, and with the help of vigilance, you will be able to you will be able to taunt very often to keep control of the ads. But let's get back to the talents. You get improved thunderclap for fast and better thunderclap with reduced range. This is for threat, basically. This is a really good mitigation talent. Some arguments can be made about changing anticipation for toughness for more mobility, but I prefer anticipation by a lot because it gives you the most effective HP, and you will definitely need it in Molten Core because your HP will be spiking up and down rapidly. You will see what I'm talking about when you first do it. Obviously, we take Last Stand, Improved Revenge. These are like the bread and butter of protection build. Shield Mastery as well. Very straightforward talents. Uh, the talents that are maybe worth more talking about are the trade-offs between choices, basically, because most of these are not choices. You have to take all of these. Improved Disciplines is debatable. I prefer to have it because there are many fights where you will get the shield wall twice with the help of this. And, and in general, I like having a shorter cooldown on it. But if you would only be able to use it once per fight, then it would not be a big deal. Concussion Blow is obviously super strong, scales on attack power and stance. This is for threat. What else? All of these talents are mandatory. You reduce damage taken and makes you enraged. This is where the choice begins. Focus Rage is not mandatory, but I prefer it because I like to have reduced rage on all of my offensive abilities, which reduces revenge to 2 rage and the shockwave and etc. to 12 rage. So they are usable even if I am starving for rage in a single target environment. But if you want maximum survival and are not concerned with rage at all, you should drop this and get 3 more points in toughness. Or if you are going to solo tank, maybe not solo, but if you are going to boss tank, boss with a lot of spell damage, you should consider taking spell reflection. The main reason we don't take it at the moment is because spell reflection is a level 64 ability, so it's only 4% chance reduced from being hit by spells, which is not bad. But like I said, I prefer to strengthen the class's strengths than try to cover its weaknesses that much. Like warrior is good for something, and I will try to make it do that to the best of its abilities rather than trying to cover its weaknesses from talents at least. Yeah, this vitality is obvious choice, and everything else here is pretty much mandatory. This is for threat. Uh, this is for blocking for insane values. This is for procs and critical chance of your devastate, uh, which gives you shield slam procs, which are quite good for threat generation. This is probably the most convenient talent of all time, and obviously shockwave. So these are very straightforward talents. You can make some adjustments. You can remove focus rage in favor of toughness or spell reflection, or you can consider taking puncture if you want even more threat, but less survival is enough for you. Then you can take puncture as well. So you can drop this at 1 point from there and take it. Both of these are viable considerations. Everything else is you shouldn't consider them. Glyphs, you don't have a lot of choices. You stack Thunder Armor and the Glyph of Cleaving because, like I said, we are concerned about AoE tanking and keeping AoE threat at all times. So this is the setup that we are going for. And the setup that I recommend, obviously. This concludes the talents and glyph section. And now I will be going over the gear. I will share with you two pieces of gear that not two pieces, sorry, two sets of gear that I recommend for Molten Core, but everything in general at 60 content. I will be using the 8 piece of the Heroism set, which is the tier 0.5 set that you can acquire at the moment. It has really good set bonuses. The armor is super welcome. The items in general have high armor on them and are quite efficient in their stats. Two items with hit rating are also welcome, as you can see here. So I will be using the 8 piece of the heroism set with the enchants that you can see on them. As for neck, I will be using Dark Moon Amulet. If you don't have this, there are alternatives, but if you have it, of course, you should keep using this. Also, it is important to note that all of my builds will aim for 7% hit or 70 hit rating because we are playing on alliance side and we have Draenei ratio. So if you are playing on Horde, you should always have 8% hit rating, which is the cap. Uh, Another important thing to note is that defense stacking is not important in the slightest in this bracket. Of course, it helps, but it will not give you the most effective HP or the most survival at all. Armor, for example, is much important, avoidance is much important, and max HP is much important at the moment. Also, it is also important to note that maybe people who are coming from classic will not know this. There are no crushing blows in the Wrath of the Lich King, so you will not be crushed. Basically, you will only be crit sometimes. What else? After the gear, I am using the Shifting Cloak, the Amulet of Dark Moon. Band of Resolution for avoidance from defense, and Stamina, which is the main concern. Myrmidon Signet for more stats. These two hit trinkets are like the bread and butter of almost all tank builds. You will be using these two trinkets on all three of the tanks 99% of the time because they are the most effective way to get the required hit rating and allow you more freedom in your gearing. Satyr's Bow will give us 10 more hit, which is 1%. The Earthen Guard is available in ChromieCraft at the moment. You can farm this in Silitus, the Council. You can see the Abyssal Council, the third tier of bosses. It will drop from the Earth boss, Baron Kazum. And it is by far the strongest shield available, and it will be for a long time. So I recommend that you farm it. For single target boss tanking, I am going to use Annihilator, and this stacks 3 times and reduced boss's armor by 600, and it is quite useful. But if I am tanking ads, I will be using either my Alcor Sunraiser, depending on which ads, or my Crawlblade. So these are the 3 weapons that I bring into the raid, and I will talk more about the Sunraiser later. But Crawl's Blade and Annihilator are very straightforward. If I am tanking boss, I will use Annihilator. If I am tanking something else, I will use Crawl Blade. This is the main set. And it is also important to talk about the fire resistance set, which I will show you now, which is going to be required if you want to survive Ragnaros, because he hits incredibly hard. This is the fire resistance set that I will be using. It has 172 fire resistance unbuffed. You can see the other important stats here, still hit capped. But this time I'm getting the hit from the necklace because we are not using the heroism set all pieces. Now let's go over the gear. I'm using 2 fire resistance rings. This can roll up to 23, but I mean this particular one can roll up to 21, but there is another one that can roll to 23. I just haven't used them on this character. Same hit trinkets, heroism boots, and shoulders, because they are the most effective pieces to get the 2-piece, which gives you resistance from. Because of dark iron set not being craftable at the moment, we don't have fire resistance legs available, but Cloud Keepers is an excellent choice to put a fire resistance enchant on and use, of course. So I recommend that you do this. This one is from Dire Molnor Tribute Run and quite easy to get. This is just a filler gloves to maximize survival and get more defensive stats, because there aren't any good options for fire resistance yet. This is from Black Rock Depths Incendious. You can easily farm this by queuing to Upper City, and you will jump down and kill the boss basically and get out and keep farming it until you get this off the bear roll, which is what you are going for, fire resistance. This is a really strong fire resistance item that not many people will have, and I will say that it's not required, but it is super strong and helps out a lot. 800 armor and 30 stamina. This item is just insane. It drops from Git in Upper Blackrock Spire, and you will be able to use this chromatic carapace to turn it in for the chest, which is quite easy to do the quest. You just need to get this chromatic carapace to drop, which is 2%, so good luck. The cape I will be using is Cape of the Fire Salamander. It drops from BRD again, the second boss in Upper City. Let me show you quickly. So this guy, Ambassador Flamelash, drops it, and I prefer it over the one from the Ember Seer in UBRS with 20 resistance. I prefer it because 12 stamina and 12 fire resistance is more efficient. They already talked about the shoulders. This is from the tier 0.5 quest line that you get, which is important to get hit cap, because, for example, if you use something like Ember Fury Talisman for 7 hit, you will be at 69, which is 6.9%, so you can still miss 0.1%. I mean, it might not be a big deal for you, but I want to be hit capped at all times, so I went for the Ogre instead. Lastly, Git's Skull of Fire resistance also drops from Git, and not that hard to farm, a couple of runs and this will drop, and you should enchant it with fire resistance. This is the total sum of the set. Oh, and weapon is Sunraiser and the same shield and the same bow. So this is the stats that I will be getting from the fire resistance set, and I recommend something similar if you want to survive Ragnaros in week 1. And this is also important to note that if you farm trash, you will be able to craft 3 really strong pieces, and you will replace them in your fire resistance set. They are Dark Iron Helm, which gives 20 stamina and 35 fire resistance, and a lot of armor. This is simply superior to Git Skull. So once you farm some materials, you will be able to craft this in the first week. And another one is the gloves. You will be replacing the gloves that give just a little bit of defensive stats with these really strong gloves as well. And you should prepare the materials in advance. And the third one is legs, stamina, and fire resistance again. So you will replace these 3 pieces with the dark iron ones and enchant them with fire resistance again, and will be a lot stronger for the Ragnaros fight. You will be gaining about, let's say, 80 more fire resistance unbuffed, so you will be at 250, which will bring you over to 310 with buffs. But this mostly concludes the gearing for Prot warriors, and now we can talk about the last section, which is consumables. In Molten Core, you will be using Flask of the Titans at all times. Never be without using the flask. And you will also be using Stamina Food, but you can also use Ramsey Black Label or about the same bonus. So Stamina Food, Flask of the Titans are your bread and butter. If you're one for theatrics, you should also use Savory Deviate Delight. This is best in slot if you are a tryhard tank, PPC of course. What else you should bring are basically potions, health potions, swiftness potions in case you have to close the gap very fast, and then protection potions. So the Greater Arcane Protection Potion is useful for Shazra fight. Fire Protection Potion is useful for Baron Geddon and Ragnaros. This is useless. This is useless. This is almost useless except for Majordomo fight. In Majordomo fight, all of your DPS should use it in case they get hit by shadow balls in the beginning of the phase. But that's it. You will obviously crowd control the healers in the Majordomo fight after like the first 2 seconds of the fight, but until then, this is useful to have. Another very useful consumable that you should bring is resistance potion. It is important to note that this doesn't stack with the fire resistance aura or things like that. So, and of course Mark of the Wild and things like that. But note that you don't have an arcane resistance aura, so you should bring and use this very cheap potion, by the way, not even 1 gold to craft. You should bring this potion to fight Shazra, which does arcane damage, so this will boost your arcane resistance by 30 on top of the Mark of the Wild. Not 50, but it's still really useful and costs you nothing. Use this before the fight, and you can use arcane protection potion if you are ever in trouble in the fight. Another consumable that you should always be using on pull is Greater Stone Shield potion. This is a little bit expensive, about 6 gold to make, or maybe about 4 gold if you can find stone scale oil cheap. So I will not be expecting everyone to use this on every boss, every pull, but at the very least use this lesser version, which is about 30 silver to craft, very very cheap, and you should be using this at the very least on every single boss pull before the pull, and refresh it in the fight if the fight is mostly physical. And like I said, you are going to be tanking the ads most of the time, so always keep armor potions to engage the bosses. Another thing you should keep as consumables is scrolls. Have protection scrolls to cast on yourself at all times. But this pretty much concludes the consumables section as well. And now we can finalize and talk about Molten Core uh, tips and tricks, or maybe like a couple of recommendations on how I recommend you tackle it in the first week and upcoming weeks. As you all know, you will have to farm reputation for the dowses, which are required to summon Majordomo, and that will make you able to kill Ragnaros. So you should probably farm reputation for Hydraxian Waterlords and do the quest line, which is going to enable you to summon and kill the bosses. But if we take a quick look at all the Molten Core bosses, the ones that are going to give you trouble are probably Majordomo and Ragnaros. Everything else, with a couple of tries at most, you will get them down. But Majordomo, I will have some quick tips for you to not waste time. Basically, bring at least 3 mages if you want the convenience of doing the fight in easy mode. What mages can do that other classes can't is polymorphing the healers in the fight. There will be 4 healer ads and 4 elite ads. These elites hit like a truck. They hit for like about 2.5k each auto attack, and each tank will be tanking 2 at a time, maybe about 2k auto attack, depending on like the situation and the buffs and everything. But they hit for a lot. They hit very often, and the tanks will be already in a rough spot, tanking 2 at a time. I really recommend using 3 tanks in this fight. 1 tank should stay on boss at all times and take the healers as well. The other tanks should split the 2 elites and tank them, and that way you're going to split the damage taken by a lot, and also just polymorph the healers that you are not killing. I don't want to turn this into a like majordomo guide, but these are the tips that I will give. And also keep Curse of Tongues on the casters at all times, and interrupt the casters at all times. As much as you can, do an interrupt order for your party and make sure no one wastes their interrupts. And the last important thing to note is that once you kill 4 ads, no matter which, the ads will no longer be CCable, so make sure that you keep that in mind and kill the ones that are going to make the fight easiest for you. As for Ragnaros, this fight, the melee DPS should also bring fire resistance gear without sacrificing so much damage. But the fire resistance will really be required for melee as well, because they take a shit ton of damage. And in general, they are kind of your weakness in this fight. The more ranged you have, the better, obviously. Uh, and again, there are a lot of Ragnaros guys out there, and this doesn't have any new mechanics, so I don't think I need to talk that much about Ragnaros other than just preparation and telling you to bring fire resistance on all of your melee, like rogues, warriors, red paladins, Nazman, shamans, whatever. Just bring a shit ton of fire resistance. A good amount to aim for would be at least 150 with buffs, so maybe about 80-90 unbuffed is good for melee DPS. Casters don't need any, and healers don't need any. So that's basically it for the first of this series, the first video, which is the Prot Warrior Guide. I hope you enjoyed it and will find the information useful. Like I said, I didn't talk about like what each of these abilities do or like how you should play this class because there are many other guys that will teach you that. I wanted to focus on the specifics of ChromieCraft and preparation, which is the biggest part, arguably, for classic content because they are not inherently difficult mechanically. So, like, there is not that much going on in terms of mechanics in Molten Core and in all classic raids. They are quite easy in terms of mechanics, but preparation is the most of the difficulty. If you don't have a character that is ready to tackle the raid, you will wipe because you will die as a tank. They do a lot of damage because of the tuning. As you know, the bosses and everything are very highly tuned and they do a shit ton of damage. So make sure you prepare your character to the best of your ability. Make sure you are always stacked up on consumables and the flask and food and never be without this. A good tank is never without any of the consumables that are required in the raid and will always farm the best gear humanly possible to basically help the raid as much as possible. So thank you guys for watching and see you next time.